Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
I'm Pete Eyre. Right now I'm most active with copblock.org. It's a decentralized project that focuses on police accountability. And since I guess probably early '09, I've been in the Keene area when I'm not on the road. And one of the things that attracted me to that area was just the type of what I saw as proactiveness of a lot of people who chose to move to that area, which tended to be more focused on, sort of non-cooperation or just sort of living the ideas instead of being involved inside the political system, which to me is attractive because I don't want to grant legitimacy to that system. I think it's a I don't just think it's a monopoly based on coercion, so I don't want to associate with that or perpetuate it. So that's why I tend to try to pursue other avenues to bring about a more peaceful conclusion.
And I'm Ian Freeman. I host Free Talk Live and do a number of other things. I mostly agree with Pete, but I also don't have a problem with running for political office. To me, I see that as an opportunity to reach out to a group of people that is interested in what's going on in the world. And for instance, my school board run cost me $0 to file for the position. I've got an article that's going to appear in the newspaper with my answers to a bunch of questions. I'm going to be on the radio to talk about those ideas, and I'll be at a candidates forum. So even if I don't win, and I don't expect to, it's a way for me to get ideas out. And that's really what I'm all about, is getting the ideas of liberty into as many people's heads as possible. So that's what I do with media. It's what I do with stuff like Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, and whatever other methods are possible. So we've got a list of different types of non-political activism. How many people here would consider themselves a current, an activist? Are you an activist today? About half the audience. So some people are kind of looking at maybe getting active, and I find that that's the case with a lot of people that show up here in New Hampshire for the Free State Project. Is they've never done activism before, and I've been doing it for all of my adult life, and so a lot of people come in and they don't know where to start. They're not sure what's even attractive to them. And so let's go down the list. Civil disobedience, you and I have got a lot of experience with that.
Right, yeah. So civil disobedience, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with different iterations that can encompass, both here in New Hampshire and just in the larger scheme of things throughout the world and history. And the positives of this, I think if there's a lot of people that are familiar with an idea, that it can have a significant impact. If a lot of people just say enough is enough, let's take a stand on this issue, and we're willing to be arrested, maybe kidnapped and caged, to point out the injustices of this law, or what legislation people conflate to be law. So it's essentially a high risk form of non-political activism, being that your freedom, you could be caged, and in some instances throughout history, it could also be up and including death. But right now, that's for the types of civ dis that are going on in the Shire. That's not something that we're too worried about facing death, but it's definitely, there's years hanging over some people's heads for actions that they engage in, and to be clear, these are actions that cause no victim to a person or property. They're just merely disobeying the dictates of some other people who claim the authority over you. So it can have a very significant impact and show someone, just really showcase how flawed these bad ideas are, that the fact that a peaceful person is being threatened with years in a cage. So
it also can start a conversation. Civil disobedience, one of the classic examples from our activism was in Keene in 2009, when Rich Paul and some other folks started up the 420 celebrations that were going on, what happened on a daily basis for several months, and then continued on into the next year. Those were going on to the point where it was a topic of conversation around town. Keene's not a big place, so things like that are really conspicuous and noticeable create conversation and give people the opportunity to, maybe talk about marijuana legalization at a family dinner or at work next to the water cooler. that kind of thing. So I think civil disobedience is also good from a publicity perspective. Of course, some people will say the opposite's true, and that, well, you guys are ruining it for the rest of us. You're ruining the liberty movement by doing civil disobedience. Everybody should just go and beg politicians for their freedom. But I disagree. I think that if you want to be free, you have to act like you're free. And if more people would just decide to live free, then we would have more freedom. But people are scared, and understandably so. I mean, they put people in jail, and that's scary. But if enough people were to disobey, they wouldn't have enough jail cells, which is why they really couldn't do anything about the 420s, because they grew. It started with a couple people, went to like 7, and then 15, and then by the end of the week it had hit 100 people. They don't have more than 40 cops in Keene, and that's if they were all on duty at the same time, and that's never the case. So once you get enough people doing civil disobedience, they can't do anything about it. And so there's, I think, a lot of real potential there. Most of the instances that we've had, like if you haven't seen Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, come to this room tonight at 10:15. Derek will be here. He'll be presenting the film, and we'll be screening the director's cut, which is a real great compendium of a lot of civil disobedience that happened in about a year-long period of time with Derek J. He was arrested 5 times in that year-long period. And unfortunately, they were all instances where he was really the only disobedient person in each instance. And when that happens, you usually go down, and you go down hard. And it was great, in the long run, because we made a really persuasive 90-minute documentary out of it. But Derek J has the 2-year suspended sentence hanging over his head of 540 days in jail, and so he's on a self-imposed exile from living in New Hampshire. He'll be breaking that exile to come to the conference here today. But numbers are really, to me, what make the most difference when it comes to civil disobedience. Although, if it's still just that one person, if you've got video cameras around, you can still make the most out of whatever it is that happens to that one person by publicizing it, be it blogging, putting it on television, whatever else is necessary.
Yeah, and civ dis, just like all these other forms of non-political activism we'll touch on, are really up to the individual. Their subjective stance, like what issues are important for them, where they're willing to take a stand, unlike, say, political activism, where you're forced into the system to, like, I don't really agree with everything about this person stands for, but I'm going to side with this or that, but so civ dis, it's really it's subjective to the individual, what's important for them, like where the line in the sand is, what they want to make a stand on, recognizing that there could be risks and things, but
also forces the hands of the state too, because when civil disobedience is done, the state can only do 2 things. It can either ignore it or it can crack down. And if they ignore it, then it looks good, because then you've got 100 people in Central Square smoking cannabis and no one gets arrested. And so that makes them look inconsistent with their application of their rules. Or if they crack down, then they look like little tyrants, and that doesn't make them look good either. So from a PR perspective, looking at it that way, it's very good.
Yeah, especially here in the Shire, and thanks to tools like the internet and the cameras that are proliferated, even if it is just one person, then like Ian touched on, it could be leveraged, and if something does happen, there could be hundreds or thousands of people that make calls or show up and support, and that can really be a game changer. So other people that support the actions don't necessarily, they may not see themselves out on the front line. They have families, they have jobs, they might think it's too risky to engage in themselves, but they can appreciate and recognize how it does push forward this freedom message and support in those other ways.
That's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of support roles for civil disobedience. So money and support, maybe sometimes a place to stay, and it could be as simple as talking to people at work. If you're at work, the water cooler conversations happening about, oh, that crazy kid who was trying to smoke pot in Central Square. It's like, well, I know that guy. He's actually really nice. Having one of those conversations with people in the community can totally change how they perceive things. And I think that's another form of non-political activism, just talking to people. And I think it's one of the most unsung things about this movement is that we've got thousands of people who are going to move to New Hampshire. We've already had hundreds of them. There's in Keene, because of all the apolitical stuff that's happened there and the news that's been generated, there's admittedly some nasty rumors that go around town about the activists, and people talk shit about you know, some of the stuff that's gone on. And they'll talk shit about Free Staters and use it as a pejorative kind of a term. But that kind of misinformation can be washed away in an instant when the person that they're talking to turns out to also be a Free Stater. And, oh, surprise, you've been working with a Free Stater for the last year. And you like this person, you know, you don't like what you heard about what that one Free Stater did downtown, but you never saw it or met that person, but you do like the person that you work with. And so the more people that we can have move into New Hampshire, the more integration Liberty people will have in the community, in churches, in schools, and workplaces. And inevitably, more of us are going to touch more regular folks' lives. And at some point, they're going to find out who they've been interacting with. And for the people that are haters towards the Free State Project, it's going to be a tough moment for them because they're not going to want to hate the person that they've been enjoying their company. So I think just talking to people and becoming friends and members of the community is really important non-political activism.
Yeah, so this transitions into the second one we'd written down, outreach. Just, I mean, sharing ideas is very powerful. So if you can, if someone is if you have a personal relationship or some rapport with them, and then you broach a conversation, they're much more likely to be open-minded to think about what you're talking about instead of just reject it out of hand. And some of these knee-jerk reactions that may be negative to a categorization as a Free Stater or Free Keen or whatever, like do go away. You know, oftentimes I've never had somebody that I've met who I known has had a negative view initially leave a conversation still with that negative view. It's either neutral or positive. And I've had, you know, I've talked to a lot of people in town and worked from like a Starbucks in town, and you know had this, you know, personal conversation. A lady who told the manager, you know who that is? He's a Free Stater. And then the manager's like, well, you should talk to him. He's a nice guy. And the next time she was in there, she did. And she sat down for 15 minutes, and we left shaking hands, and it was a friendly conversation. So you never know, like, just sharing these ideas. Part of the reason I think that it is easy for some people just to put up a wall and reject them out of hand without considering them is you can't let yourself get frustrated or angry about that. You have to, for me at least, I try to recognize that most folks have only been exposed to ideas that are peddled through gun run, like public schools. You know, I say gun run because they're funded through theft, you know, or else, and or the mainstream media. So they never really thought about these ideas of self-ownership or other things potentially, you know, and how that may apply and affect all these other situations. So just having that personal rapport goes a long way. So the outreach, you know, you might target specific demographics or focus on a single issue area, whatever's.
Or I'll just go out and take a flyer like a Don't Take a Plea Deal. We do Don't Take a Plea Deal outreach every morning in Keene whenever they have arraignments. So every arraignment we've got people there with information for folks, encouraging them to clog the courts. Or I'll just show up at a you know, general interest event like Pumpkin Fest or Music Fest, where there's just hundreds of people in the streets, and I'll come with a generic flyer like Philosophy of Liberty, which we've got up at the Free Keene table. You're welcome to take one home with you. And there's printable PDFs online at tools.freekeene.com. You can print this out, send it to your favorite printer, libertyactivistprinting.com or wherever, and then do them in your area. This is not area specific, but it's a great intro flyer, and I'll just go out and, you know, offer people flyers all day long, and somebody's going to read it. You know, somebody's going to take that and take the time. There's so many different ways to do outreach, but if you think about the haters, you know, for lack of a better term, people like to point to Keene, the critics like to point to Keene as, oh, you guys are ruining it for the movement. But I think what's really, you know, the right perspective there is that the more active you are, the more visibly active you are, the more likely someone's going to hate what you're doing, especially the people that work for the state. And really that's where it comes from. It's the people who work for the state, who have friends in the community, and it's not a big place. New Hampshire is not a big place, and Keene certainly isn't a big place. So everybody kind of knows everybody else. And the people that work for the state are human beings, and they've got families, and they've got friends. And so like recently we've had Robin Hooding going on, which is kind of a form of direct action where people will walk down the street as the meter maid is walking down the street. They'll walk in front of the meter maid, and they'll have nickels in their hands, and they'll feed a nickel into an expired meter before the meter maid can reach the meter. And that saves that person from getting a parking ticket. We'll leave a little card on their car to let them know they've been saved. And as you might imagine, the friends of the parking enforcer, there was a young guy, sent a message on Facebook. He might be 18 or 19 years old. He sends a message saying, hey, the male parking enforcer is my friend, and I don't appreciate what you're doing, and you're harassing him. And, and that's how it feels to them. They don't understand the perspective that they're a public so-called servant, and they should be recorded if someone wants to record them. To them, somebody's interfering with their duties and their job, and to their friends that, hey, that's my friend you're messing with. So ultimately, the more visible your activism is, the more likely people inside the state are going to be upset at you, and by proxy, all the people they talk trash to about you and what their experiences are with you. So, and we started to see that with the political activism as well. When the political activism actually starts to become effective, then people start to come out against that. And there's a big pushback from some of the Democrats, for instance, against liberty activists out here. So I think that's just kind of part and parcel of just doing visible activism. Some people aren't going to like it, especially the people whose jobs are directly threatened by it.
Right, it reminds me of that statement, if you're getting flack, it means you're over the target.
Yeah.
But even thinking of that with that mindset implies that there is a target, that there is an us versus them. And for me, I think it's much more positive if we can strive for like a mutual coexistence or like a mutual appreciation community. And so one tactic that I think leads to that more effectively, or maybe brings it about more likely, is mutual aid. And for example, I was just in St. Louis, and a guy there, he and some of his crew were doing mutual aid outreach to folks in the area. And so they were going out and essentially being good neighbors, and they were saying, hey, do you have any stuff in your closet or in your attic you don't use anymore? And they'd essentially just go help clean it out, and then they'd make it shoes or luggage or alt books, whatever. And then they talk with other people in the neighborhood and find out where the needs are, and they just redistribute this stuff everywhere. And they're doing like urban gardens and these other things where people are coming together and not being sort of isolated in their houses and like fearful of everyone, which is what these folks who want to try to control us, they perpetuate their so-claimed authority on fear of the other, and they say, look at us as the authorities. So these mutual aid efforts are undermining that, and they're directly allowing people to connect with folks in their area. So I think that's a very powerful tactic that can be taken.
Free aid might be a good example of something like that going on here in New Hampshire. I don't know if they have a booth here. I haven't been in the vendor room. They don't?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. They might, though.
Stephanie's here, though.
Stephanie's here.
Stephanie will be hosting Pork Therapy out here tonight, 10 o'clock. She can tell you more about free aid, but it's a group of EMS-type folks who, they know health, they know emergency techniques, and they've come together to create a booth at Pork Fest, which is a medical booth, and they've been doing other outreach events from what I understand. I can't tell you much more than that, but that's one example of something. Also, would Shire Sharing count?
Yeah, definitely.
So Shire Sharing, Amanda Bolden is also here, and she's been doing some great stuff around Thanksgiving, gathering thousands of dollars in donations and buying turkeys and stuffing and food for hundreds of families, which is great. And I'm sure that we'll only see that expand over the years as it becomes better organized and better funded. Unschooling. That's, it's not as visible, but it's something that can certainly change the direction of some people's lives, and that would be young people. Although I think there's also an argument that can be made to have Lori, who's a friend of ours from the Keene area. She's a local mom who, I don't know if she's a native, but she's close to it. She's a local mom who came across the ideas of liberty and just absolutely fell for it. She is so on board and so excited about it. She offered to her kids, hey, I'm ready to take you out of school. And so I think 2 of her kids wanted to do it, but the third teenage girl didn't really want that. She wanted to stay in the school. She said she thinks she could be more effective in the government school. So, to some extent, you could have kind of a monkey wrenching situation where, you know, if I support the unschooling idea, I think it's a great idea, but you know, in her case, her daughter wanted to go to the government school. She's not going to force her out of the school, force her into an unschooling environment. So if that's what you want to do, then there's some value there to, you know, do an outreach at the school.
Is that a new term for anybody, unschooling? Is that a new concept?
Good question.
Okay.
I never heard that term.
It's
I mean, I've heard homeschooling, but is that the same thing?
It's similar, but homeschooling still has like sort of a structured framework, whether, you know, and they still oftentimes have to go get permission from the state authorities on what they're teaching and take tests. Unschooling is, hey, you're an individual, I'll help facilitate you learning about what you're interested in. So if you're interested in science, I'll get you a chemistry set, or we'll go to the museum, or we'll do these things, but it's essentially more hands-off.
More of a self-directed
Yeah.
learning. Where the child directs its own learning.
How does the state handle that? I mean,
I have no idea.
Can you get in
It
trouble for
depends on
doing
the
it
state.
and not sending them to a school?
It depends on the state. So there's different states have different rules. From what I've heard, New Hampshire's rules have been kind of rolled back. There have been a lessening in the severity of the rules. They used to require like a lesson plan or something. I think now all they demand is that you give them notice that you're schooling. But don't quote me on that. I'm not a parent, so I can't answer that.
I was gonna say too, there's a term called being an autodidact, I think it's
Autodidact?
Autodidact, I think, and it's about being very self-directed. So I think the distinction between homeschooling and unschooling is that unschooling is a lot more, the child has a lot more, or the young person in general has a lot more self-direction over their own education. Well, homeschooling can also have that too, but it tends to be also more directed from the parents, but not always.
And to go back to y'all's question, I would say that part of that too hinges on whether the child or the younger individual is even on the radar of these claimed authorities. I mean, more people are doing home births, they're not getting slave numbers and all these other things, so they're not even on the radar at all. So the fact that if they want to learn at their house, or you want to pool resources with folks in your neighborhood, or you recognize this person is an authority on something and they want to go hang out with them a few hours a week or whatever, like that, they wouldn't even be on the radar.
Would you still suggest they get a GED? Like, I know a lot of jobs require you to get at least a
Most
high school
jobs
diploma.
don't check. I mean, if you applied for a job and
Understood.
said, I'm a high school graduate, no one's
Right.
going to look for a high school diploma because it's not important.
Right.
Media creation, something else Pete and I have a lot of experience with is, putting videos out there and doing radio interviews and, whatever other media we can get out into people's eyes and ears. This is, in my opinion, one of the most effective forms of activism. And it's also outreach. In Keene, we've got a 24-hour a day radio station that airs LRN.FM content. It is completely unlicensed, and it has been operating now for 8 months, unmolested by the FCC. So would recommend highly that people consider this for their area. If you have liberty-friendly landlords or liberty-friendly property owners, those are the places where you can locate a transmitter and let it roll and see how long you can go for before the FCC shows up.
Does it
And
play on terrestrial radio, or do you have to like stream it on?
terrestrial. I'm talking about an actual radio station. So I program LRN.FM, which is an internet stream, but this radio station picks up that internet stream and rebroadcasts it all the time. So we've got a pro-liberty message on the air around the clock on the FM band in Keene. So everybody that's hitting the scan button on their radio is going to come across Free Talk Live, Ernie Hancock's show, and 36 other shows running all the time. So
More generally speaking, would you consider that a form of like ham radio or pirate radio kind of thing? Like, and what are you and Pete's general thoughts on that kind of tactic?
that's pirate radio for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
if you're doing radio without a license, that's
Right,
pirate
okay.
radio, and there is a risk involved. I mean,
Right.
the risk is the FCC could raid your home, but generally they usually start with a threatening letter. They will come sniffing around. We had a radio station on in Keene a couple years ago. It was on a different frequency, but we had that for 8 months. The FCC did come and start sniffing around, talking to neighbors in the area in which they suspected the station was operating. The station operator shut it down, and that was the last he heard from them. So there's a new station now. It took another year or so to get it back on, to find a new place to put it. But I think that's so effective because for a relatively small investment of money, for the amount of money you might spend printing a bunch of flyers and then going and handing those out, one flyer print job, you can have the hardware for a radio station to operate that anyone with a radio, which is almost everyone, can tune in and listen to. So it's a great way to affect outreach. And then of course there's doing stuff on like your local cable access channel, which I know that you've been involved in some of Shire TV episodes and Free Keene TV.
Yeah, so media creation, I mean, I totally agree with Ian. If you're going to go out there and do something, it's a sunk cost. So if you can document and disseminate it, then anybody with an internet connection or whatever can usually learn of it. And I met a guy a couple weeks ago. He's like, I've been arrested 10 times, and I go out and I hold a sign and do this, and he's never done anything wrong. But I'm like, dude, like, so you might be reaching a couple dozen people each time, but the fact that you're not blogging about it or documenting it, like, I think you're selling yourself short. Like, you might as well leverage this and get it out in front of more eyes, which means it's getting in front of more minds. And maybe you'll have some more support, so then it'll lessen the risk of being kidnapped and caged. So media curation can also include things like newspapers, which Daryl Perry's doing in Keene, and there's been other iterations in the past in the Shire. Obviously group blogs. I mean, it is, I would think a lot of us in here are active online in that sort of sphere, but I would just recommend, I mean, it is a lot of work to create a new site or a new brand or new blog, and to keep fresh content on it. So if there's something that you like, you can potentially get involved with that and just add some capacity to that and build something up better. But really,
there's a
you can take it
commitment
wherever you
involved.
want.
I mean, I think there's a real commitment involved in doing media right. So, like people saying, you start up a blog, but then you don't put anything there. Well, what's the point? So, if you're going to do a blog, then make a point of putting up content on at least a weekly basis, if not daily, if you can do that. And then, same thing with doing television or radio. In Keene, we have Shire TV, which started as Free Keene TV. It's been on the air now for over a year and a half, and it's a weekly live television news show. It's something that people can take. They can watch it. They can watch it later on YouTube, obviously on freekeene.com. But there are a lot of people who, they still watch TV. And being on the local cable access channel in a town like Keene, there's 25,000 people that live in Keene. There are no major networks that have television stations in Keene. So the local cable access channel is the local channel. That's where you go if you want to see stuff produced locally. And in a town like Keene, being local is a big deal. That's something that sells. That's something that people are interested in. So it's a lot of folks that watch that channel. And yeah, they put a lot of hard work into that show, but once you get it going and you get into the operation of doing certain things at certain times each week in preparation for your show, then it becomes just a tradition. Now they meet Mondays and they do an episode, and then afterwards they go out for happy hour after that, and they kind of have a post-show meeting, and it's really turned into something unique. I don't know how many other, in the whole Liberty movement, I don't know how many other live television Liberty news shows there are. Has anyone ever heard of another one? I haven't either. So, having the people together first is the key factor, because, where I come from, I never would have been able to do anything like Shire TV. I mean, we just didn't have the numbers of people.
The name of the program, Shire
That's right,
TV?
Shire
And,
TV.
what channel is that on?
In Keene, it's on channel 8, so it's in that top tier, right up in the first 20 channels. That's got on a channel called Cheshire TV, and it's a public access channel. A lot of different areas have these. Manchester has one. I'm pretty sure Concord has one. So the city areas have them, and they'll let anybody come in and produce a show.
Right.
You just have to be willing to put the time into it. So I think media creation is one of the most effective dollar-for-dollar things that we can do. And that's also another thing that maybe you don't feel like you want to get in front of or behind a camera. But if you've got some money, certainly all of these people creating media, find one of them or two of them that you really enjoy and send them, a few bucks. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. So the next thing we've got here on the list is agorism. And I feel like agorism is another one of those subtle activisms. No one's really going to notice it unless you go out there and hang out your shingle. A lot of people doing agorism, which is kind of the underground economy, doing business without state permission, that sort of thing. A lot of those people don't want it known that they're doing agorism. But the ultimate expression of agorism would be for someone to open a business publicly and not get licenses and not get permits. That we don't really see too often. But then then you'd be getting, I think, changing from agorism into more civil disobedience at that point. But I think, what is agorism good for as far as activism is concerned?
I mean, I guess the way I look at the massive pros from agorism is that, if you recognize that there's a lot of people being harmed or misallocation of resources through the current coercive monopoly and its regulatory state and entry barriers and all these other things, agorism is creating competing, like, parallel institutions. So the needs and goods, services that people want are being supplied, but they're being supplied absent all that, all the meddling of a third party that has no business being involved between consensual interactions of individuals. So, Stateless Sweets is upstairs right now, and Jillian, she's out in Cali, but she, was creating whatever sweets essentially, and that people liked, and she saw a niche there, so she creates them, and now that's her business, and it's agorist because there's no, 10 whatever, I don't even know the tax forms anymore, but there's nothing like that. It's just, it's somebody says, hey, I'd like that, and they reach a mutual exchange, and it happens, and both parties are better off. So the more goods and services that are done that way, the better. So if if you're a hairdresser or something, like, why even bother jumping through these hoops, getting like a license to put on the wall? I mean, there's hairdressers that do a terrible job that have that license on the wall. It doesn't mean that you're going to get a good haircut. So if someone does haircuts well, and people recognize that, they're going to vote with their dollars and say, hey, I can go over to this dude and get it for $10, or I can go to this store and get it for $15-20. And so it's in my rational self-interest to go here. And so they don't even necessarily have to be introduced or exposed or even in lockstep with these ideas of complete liberty. They can just be driven by their economic self-interest. And so the more each of us pursuing our passions are creating these goods and services, then the more chances are that other folks in our spheres, in our neighborhoods, in our towns will see that. And I encourage you to go to Pork Fest, because that's the best example I know of. There's I don't know, hundreds, a lot of people that are essentially everything from like ice cream to I don't know, whatever else is there.
Well, if somebody's buying an ice cream cone from an agorist ice cream creator, vendor, then that's money that they aren't spending at the state licensed ice cream shop.
Right.
And that's money that goes into the agorist's pocket to help that person who believes in liberty, and it's less money maybe, hopefully, that's leaving the other person's pocket. So like you were saying, the economic self-interest is there, people benefit from that. And I feel it is a subtle form of activism because you're not doing it. Most agorists aren't doing it openly to defy the state. There's a guy in Keene named Mandrick. He makes some really great baklava, and he's the guy that provides most of the food for Pork Fest. He ran the pavilion this year, and Mandrick will say he's not an activist. Like, that's not his bag. He just wants to cook and clean for people, and he does it, and he does it well, and it allows somebody like me to support someone who I know is on board with these ideas, give that person some business, and get his services in return. And like I was saying before, it takes money out of the state licenses hands, and that can only be a good thing in the long run when that happens. Street theater. It's not happening as much as I might like to see. There's a little bit more planning that has to go into street theater. Costumes are always useful to have for that. But over the years, we've seen some particularly entertaining instances of this. And for instance, Robin Hood, I think to some extent is street theater, although they are not using costumes at this moment. But one of the Robin Hooders years ago used to wear a cape whenever he would go around doing Robin Hooding. And as I explained earlier, that's feeding the meters in front of the meter maid. And having that cape on brought him a level of attention that he wouldn't have otherwise received. And people loved it. I mean, obviously you're going to get the mean high school kids going to say something nasty to you. But most people really thought it was cool that some guy in a cape was going around saving people from getting parking tickets. So that's one example. Another one is, I remember Russell Canning back when I moved here in 2006. He had this great orange jumpsuit that like you'd see in a prison, and a black bag. And so, he had the black bag over his head, the orange prison jumpsuit on. He was protesting Guantanamo Bay out on the side of the road in Keene. Of course, we had signs, and he was in his get-up. And I know Dave Ridley's worn a Wookiee outfit when he's done Ron Paul Rebels or something like that. And so it's fun to bring costumes into play. You've even played a cop.
Oh yeah, in a video. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look for, what's it called, the Tamworth Millionaire Program?
Yeah, it was well done.
Look for that on YouTube, Tamworth Millionaires Program, and it's really funny stuff. So that's more of a media / theater because it's fictional, which is, you know, something we also don't see very much of right now is, you know, good fictional skits that, you know, are lampooning reality but are fun. I mean, it's easy for Free Talk Live to get on the air and talk about the news and take phone calls every night. It takes a lot more effort to write a script and, you know, bring cameras out and shoot a cut, you know, take a shot and that doesn't work. You got to do it again, shoot again, and then edit it all together and put music. But if somebody does take the time to do that, they can put together a really persuasive piece.
Yeah, especially if humor's involved. I mean, I know if I were funny, I'd definitely be going that route, but because humor, you know, can bypass a lot of the perceived walls that exist. You know, it's not, here's my idea and this is where we disagree. It's, hey, let's laugh about this, and it's I think very attractive of a medium to share ideas. So if that's your thing, I encourage you to pursue it because it's needed.
Yeah, we definitely need more theatrical kinds of things. In fact, Cody O'Connor from Off the Air Live was talking about it with us last night, about how comedy brings down those walls, like you were saying. And before, they're laughing about something because it's real and it's funny, but it's sad or scary at the same time. But then afterwards, maybe they realized they were laughing about it because it made sense and they agreed with it. But they maybe wouldn't have been willing to listen if it had been presented in another manner.
Right. I guess another thing I mentioned too is alternative currencies, you know, because if we continue using the fiat currency, the Federal Reserve notes backed by nothing, you know, but we say, oh, in the Fed, or like, you know, you guys don't have any legitimacy, and we're still using the monetary supply. Like, I know it's pretty tough today to get off of it completely, you know, in that your rent or mortgage or whatever you got to pay with these FRNs, but the more you can use alternative currencies like silver or bitcoins or you know, anything else, I would encourage that, because the more we can take that back, then we can delegitimize the bad idea that allows the state to exist and these coercive actors. So.
And that's also a big factor with agorism, using alternative currencies, another way to compete with the existing status quo, to compete with the state's currency.
Yeah, so if that's kind of a new concept, I encourage you could Google like alternative currencies or free banking or anything like that, and just see what's out there and try to incorporate it. I mean, especially now with silver's, you know, obviously there, but with bitcoins, it's easy to they're very transferable, and you know, you can use them for interactions. You know, if you have a smartphone, you can buy and sell things, and it's pretty awesome to see it grow. I'm excited.
Direct action. We talked about Robin Hooding. That's big right now in Keene. It's happening every day, and it's probably, aside from the Bearcat situation we had a year ago, it's probably the most successful form of activism. I mean, some things are more popular than others. Going naked or, you know, topless, walking down the street topless while open carrying, as happened several years ago in Keene, is not going to be as popular with people as saving folks from getting a parking ticket. So I think over time people have kind of learned through trial and error, which is really the only way you're ever really going to learn what resonates with folks and what doesn't really do so well. But, you know, direct action, getting out there and getting in the streets and doing things, and of course a lot of the other things we talked about can also be considered direct action. You know, going out and handing people flyers, outreach, holding signs, getting out and doing interviews and the man on the street sorts of things. These are all direct action. Robin Hood, I think, is a real key example of how this can be something that you can take a little bit of money. In this case, you buy a few rolls of nickels, put a little bit of money into. We bought some of these business cards. I don't have them with me, but they're up at the Free Keene table if you want to see them. They've got a picture of Robin Hood on the front, like Disney's Robin Hood, and on the back it says something to the effect of, "Thou hast been saved by the Robin Hood and the merry men from the King's Tariff," and you know, it's kind of written in a fun manner, and there's some websites on there, and you know, people love it. They've been coming up to the Robin Hooders and giving them hugs, handing them cash. Some people will put money in an envelope and send it to them. So this is really something that has won the hearts and minds of people in Keene. And it's something you might be able to do in your area, although in some places they have outlawed feeding other people's meters. So your mileage may vary.
How's the city of Keene handling this to this point? Are they?
Oh, they're frustrated. They don't know what to do about it.
Have some kind of.
I haven't heard of a proposal, but it wouldn't surprise me if that came about.
Yeah.
For them to try to put a stop to it somehow. But man, they've got to be down as far as their revenue. We've got them out there every day.
How much
I'm
is
surprised they haven't arrested.
How much is a ticket?
Oh, $5. Right. And actually, there's a new flyer being developed. We've got the card that we leave whenever we save someone. But every now and then, we're going to come across a card that's already got a ticket. And so a new flyer is coming out for the cars that already have tickets, which is going to say, hey, you don't have to pay this. You can challenge this ticket. You can clog the court system with that challenge. Because we already know the court system's already loaded up. So if 5 people a week took their parking tickets to court, they'd be dropping tickets left and right. So we've written up a new flyer, and that's going to be printed up soon. So we'll start leaving those on all the cars with the tickets and encourage people to... Are we almost out of time? Are you coming to cut us off?
No.
Okay.
One of the panels ended really early, so.
Okay.
Just whatever your clock, whatever your watch says is correct.
So real quick, one more thing. Tech behind, and then open to questions, but technology behind the scenes. This is another form of non-political activism that can really have an impact. Some of the tech that we've been using includes these two-way radios here that you see Pete and I have, and folks in Keene, a bunch of them have them. Lakes Region just picked up 7 of them. A few people in Manchester and Nashua have also bought some here. I've got them for sale at the Free Keene table. So this is a great way to communicate with other activists, maybe on a scene like, for instance, at the courthouse. I might want to be out back because we don't know which way the judge is going to leave. So I might be out back and Pete might be out front. We've both got the 2 ways, so we can easily communicate with one another and coordinate some sort of an action. And that makes it easy. And they're cheap too, so it's an easy tool. And then other tech like, obviously cameras and stuff, but less obviously stuff like Port 411, where you can call a phone number, leave a message, and then that message gets blasted out to hundreds of email recipients. Brilliant little system that's been with us now for several years. Keene 411, we have that in the Keene area where I can send a text message to a number on my phone, and then within about a few seconds, that message gets blasted out to everyone who's subscribing to Keene 411. So Pete, I don't know if you're a subscriber, I think you are. But if I send a message, Pete gets it, and so does every other activist in Keene that's subscribed to Keene 411. So sometimes we'll use it for really important things like I'm pulled over at wherever, or sometimes it's, hey, we're going out to lunch, anybody want to come with? And so it's a really great way to get information out quickly. So these are all different methods that we can use to communicate with each other and make our other activism that much more effective.
Yeah, one thing real quick that I don't think we touched on that kind of goes with, Ian mentioned the don't take a plea outreach that happens every day at court. That was bolstered by some outreach that Ian's pretty much spearheaded, where we have 4 template letters for people who were arrested for nonviolent, non-victim actions. One being for marijuana, one for vehicle offenses and things like that. That instead of the idea being instead of just give them information as they go into legal land and then hope that they say, oh yeah, I'm not going to take your plea deal, right then. The idea is that we get them the information so that in the mail, read the police blotter every week and then get their addresses, identify who's been arrested for certain things, and then include the appropriate template response in it that pretty much says, hey, we saw you arrested. That sucks. Not everyone, obviously thinks you're a bad person. Here's some resources, and da-da-da-da. So that goes out, and I think is a pretty effective outreach mechanism as well.
We were inspired by the Manchester Peaceful Streets project to do this. They're doing something similar there, where they're reaching out just to marijuana offenses, and we figured, well, it's Keene. There's not going to be as many arrests, so let's just do every nonviolent offense. And so that's why we've been hitting vehicle, alcohol, and drugs. And some weeks it's as few as 4 or 5 people. Some weeks it's as many as a dozen people. But every week we're folding papers, stuffing envelopes, putting flyers in those envelopes, putting stamps on, and mailing those out. And probably been doing it now for a couple months. And we had one lady post on the Free Keene Facebook page to never send her son anything ever again. And in other responses, Daryl has been at the courthouse when people have come in for their arraignments, and they've said to him, because we're still there handing out that flyer, but they've acknowledged to him that they've received it and that they appreciated that somebody cared enough to do that.
I remember I heard something, I think I was on your show, where a woman was quoted in the New York Times as encouraging people to take things to trial and don't do the plea deal because, quote, it would bring down the system.
That's right. Yeah, we actually had her on Free Talk Live. I'm forgetting her name at the moment, but she absolutely agreed with that. I mean, it's true. And lawyers know it. They know that the plea deal process is the supermajority of the cases. Most people take the plea because it's the attractive thing to do. It's the easy way out. It doesn't require you to actually have to go to trial. But that also means it's the easy way out for the state, and they don't have to do any work. So, like, you challenge a parking ticket, then this $5 parking ticket becomes a huge hassle for them. They've got to then go to court. They've got to then go to trial. They've got to send you discovery. So they're going to then have to put time into getting their conviction, which they'll get. I mean, you go to court on a parking ticket, you're probably going to get convicted, but at least they've had to spend hours, perhaps, preparing. The bureaucrat who wrote the ticket will actually have to be in the courtroom as opposed to on the street writing more tickets. So if 5% of people who got parking tickets would actually just challenge it, I bet you all of those tickets would be dropped.
Of course, the next thing they're going to want to do is jack up the fine for the parking.
There's been proposals. Actually, there was, if you go to freekeene.com, a few days ago, Garrett posted a video of Talkback, which is a local talk show that airs on Saturday mornings in Keene. It's kind of the local Politico show where the movers and shakers listen and the politicians and all that. And they were talking about the Robin Hooding that was going on. And one of the things that they were pointing out was, well, the co-host that morning, Jim Duffy, was one of the city councilors, and he was asked, well, haven't you tried to raise the ticket price before? And he was laughing about it because he thinks it's just hilarious to ticket people and get money from them. He's a politician. And he pointed out that it just didn't go over very well. So it's actually been tried and it failed. And in Keene, they tried to put those kiosks in too. And there was major pushback from the people of Keene on that.
Those really suck.
And they didn't put them in. They put in a couple as a test to see what people thought about it, and they got so much negative feedback. And it's very rare that when government wants to do something, they normally do it. But in Keene, they actually, like the police chief actually apologized for this. He actually stepped back and said, we're going to take this out. He realized that this was really bad PR for them, and so we managed to stop that from happening. And if we're, if we keep this Robin Hooding thing up, we might actually get them to shut down the whole parking department because they can't be collecting nearly as much revenue as they were previously. So I think we've been through the list, or at least what we think is non-political activism. Have we left anything out? Any questions?
Do you guys actually have jobs you get paid for, or are you like full-time activists?
I am a full-time activist who gets paid for activism. I host Free Talk Live, which is where I get most of the money to do all the other things.
Do you have advertisers for the radio show? Is that how you get paid?
We have advertisers and we have direct supporters. There are different ways you can do that. Mark, my co-host, is going around with a little bookmark that has some ideas on it. You can shop with shop.freetalklive.com, and we get a percentage of that. There's the AMP program, which... there's the AMP program.
Yeah, pretty much. I try to be a full-time activist. We'll see how it goes.
It's not a lucrative career. But what we are seeing is more opportunities over time for people to turn their activism into a money drain, from a money drain into something that can at least cover its costs and or turn a profit. Robin Hooding has turned a profit in the past, and it is profitable, I believe, today. They're covering their costs, as I understand it, today. And that doesn't mean they're making a whole lot of money on it, but there's money coming in because people appreciate it. That you save somebody from a $5 ticket, they're likely to give you $2 right there on the spot. Or put an envelope, put some money in an envelope and send it to you instead of sending it to the state. So you want to talk about agorism, to some extent that's competing with the state, taking the money they would have gotten and then putting it toward defeating more of the state.
So one thing you talked about was outreach, and I think that's a really good low-risk way to get involved, and especially to single interest groups, so people that are concerned about, say, drug legalization or gay rights. And that's one thing that I've done. Like I think it's actually in Derek J's movie, but I paid Derek J to come out to UNH and talk to the UNH normal kids.
Yep.
And it was really good. I mean, these kids were engaged. They were getting a lot out of it. I got 1 or 2 negative comments, but the vast majority of people thought it was a really good perspective. And now I'm trying to get Dale to come out and talk to the LGBT group on campus. Right. And I think that these people, they have it for one issue. They got the idea. And I think if you can give them the principle behind there and get them thinking about other issues the same way they think about the one they're highly concerned with, that's a really good way to convert people over to the message of liberty.
Yeah, use that as a wedge.
It's a lot easier to go to a room full of 30 people and you might convince 2 or 3 of them than it is to convince 2 or 3 people to move to New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. In fact, we've been talking with the guys from SSDP, the Students for Sensible Drug Policy at Keene State College. And now that you're back in town, I don't know if you're going to move forward with your plan.
Sure.
What do you have planned for Keene State?
I'm figuring it out. I mean,
well, we were talking about some kind of a seminar, like a Know Your Rights sort of thing. Bring Pete or Brad Jardis or somebody like that that's really, got it down when it comes to knowing your rights and asserting yourself around the police. Because these college kids are getting picked on. I mean, they're easy marks. The police are bullies, and a bully picks on the easy mark. You pick on the kid you can push around. And in the case of college kids, most of them don't know anything about their rights. And so even the most basic Know Your Rights seminar could really go a long way for folks. So I agree, connecting with college groups, really good idea.
Yeah, we've actually had a lawyer from Portsmouth come out, and that's one thing. If anyone else has a group that you want to get a kind of Know Your Rights thing, if you can't get someone like Pete to come out, you can usually get a lawyer if you find one that does DUI or drug offenses like that. They're more than welcome to come out and talk to you because they can use it kind of as advertising as well.
Yeah, we've seen just kind of off the top of it, with the lawyer angle, we've seen submissions now made to cop block from legal firms that'll do write-ups against the police state and talk about Know Your Rights stuff because they recognize that it is so pervasive now. So there definitely is willing folks from that profession to.
You just want to make sure you're not dealing with a lawyer who's just going to tell his client to take a plea deal, though, because those guys exist. They'll take $5 grand from somebody and then give them a plea deal, and acting like they did them a favor. But you can do your own plea deal on your own. If you want to take a plea deal, you don't need a lawyer to negotiate that.
So Cynthia Chase, I know she's from Keene. Have you guys done any non-political stuff towards her area? I don't know, to call her out on, she called the Free State Project the worst thing.
The greatest threat, the single greatest threat to the state.
Right.
Free
I'm wondering if you guys have
for giving you national.
Somebody did give her flowers, which
I thought was great.
That's a very outside the system thing to do.
But I'm wondering if you've heard any more from her, if she's just kind of shutting up now because she got so much negative.
Last I heard was refusing interviews. There was a Dave Ridley video recently where he tried to corner her at the State House and she refused to be interviewed. And she has told the media that she was afraid for her family's safety.
Well, you carry a gun.
I don't, actually.
Oh, no, you don't. I mean.
But I have a feeling what happened with Cynthia Chase is that when the story broke nationwide, it broke to the conservative movement, which is unfortunate because her statement wasn't about conservatives, but when Breitbart and Rush Limbaugh reported it, the way they reported her statement was that this Democratic representative said that conservatives were the greatest threat to the state, when she didn't use the word conservative at all. She used the term free staters. And but I think because of that, because of all the national attention, she probably got some really nasty and maybe even threatening emails from people who probably were conservatives. But even in the liberty movement, there's some real uncouth individuals who might do something like that. And so, unfortunately, because people do tend to collectivize, she probably saw a nasty email come in from somebody and thought that that person was a free stater. And so, she probably thinks free staters are people that are threatening her family. And that's not a good thing. But it's one of those things you can't do anything about. You can't control people.
Right. One of the positive takeaways from her statement was that in January they had the most signers for the FSP of any month ever, in part because of all the attention that it got.
Which you could trace all the way back to some of the civil disobedient activism that's going on, because that's one of the things that got attention to the Free State Project in the first place. And because Cynthia's in Keene, she's well familiar with the things that have gone on there, because that's the talk of the town when it comes to, you know, the political class and the things that they consider important and the threats to their status quo. So, you know, had Derek J's, you know, victimless crime spree never happened, had the 420s never happened, maybe she never would have made that statement in the first place.
Yeah, so one thing that, you know, if you are active in the political process, it's easy to see, like, there's this campaign date 3 months out, and you can rally behind that, or rally behind a person, or you got to get these signatures to do this. There's these measurable goals or whatever, identifiers, but with the non-political activism, mainly it's the sharing of ideas, so it's tough to measure, like, how far it spreads or how deep it spreads. So maybe this statement by this woman was one sort of takeaway that can be inferred from the impact it had.
Yeah, and, you know, if you've got the media in place, then you can take a statement like that and really make lemonade out of it. I mean, you know, had we not had Free Keene, then that statement may never have gone anywhere, because what happened with that was I saw somebody post on Facebook, one of the Free State groups on Facebook, someone posted that they had seen this comment from Cynthia Chase. I took that, made a blog post out of it at Free Keene, and then the Granite Grok guys saw that, and they reblogged that. Breitbart saw that, and Breitbart misinterpreted it, and then Limbaugh picked it up, and so, you know, had Free Keene never blogged it in the first place, maybe it would have just gone over as a comment on Blue Hampshire, and it would never have blown up into anything. So having the media in place really allowed us to take something that was really insignificant. I mean, it was just a comment she made on an article on Blue Hampshire that someone happened to see. I didn't even think anything was going to come out of it, because, you know, I'm blog posting about whatever all the time. I had no idea this was going to be something that got blown up. I mean, I thought it was a great endorsement of the Free State Project, and that's why I blogged it. I just blogged it as though, hey, look what this representative said, we must really be having an impact. That was my perspective. And then it became this national news story out of this. And I was being interviewed by one of the people from WBIN. It's the competitor to the main network TV station in New Hampshire. And the guy was like, well, I'm a member of your email list, because Free Keene's got a news list that we'll send out news releases to. And he was saying, like, well, why didn't you send this out? Because he didn't get an email about this. And I said, well, honestly, I didn't think it was newsworthy. So what do I know? You know, just having the media there and putting it out there makes it more likely someone's going to take notice of it.
I just wanted to mention to everybody the theory of agorism and the counter-economy is in this book here, the New Libertarian Manifesto. And it's been out since 1980, and I think John Bush has one copy of it for sale. But you can read on it online, so you can read the theory of it. And then, if you don't mind, I'll just mention that tomorrow in this same room, we'll have the Alternatives Expo, and we'll go through a whole day full of how to do, essentially, I mean, the goal would be vote with your feet, like you're talking about, buy your ice cream from somebody in the Agora. But in your everyday life, if you can vote, excuse me, not your feet, vote with your wallet on everything, you are in the free market. Now, of course, we're not there now, but we talk about that, the activism of how to get there. So,
is Alt Expo only tomorrow? Because someone was asking us about that.
Yeah, well, tomorrow in the amphitheater. We'll have some other things in the room.
Which room is it?
206.
So it's open today?
Yes. Yeah, I think it is now.
Yeah. Okay.
There's somebody's arranging it.
Okay, good. Because someone asked at the table earlier, and I didn't have the answer.
Go up the second floor, and just to the right out of the elevator.
Great. Any other questions about outside the system?
I was just curious, you guys talked about knee-jerk activism and kind of, I don't know, I always like to frown away from knee-jerk activism.
Give me an example.
Let me think. Well, here, from you guys, there was the law banning alcohol in a state house or something like that. So you guys did the activism of the beer can, or the can inside the paper bag where you wrote beer on it. That's not really knee-jerk because that was planned out.
No, well, hold on. Just to correct you on that, that wasn't a response to a new law at all. It had nothing to do with the State House. That was a protest about open container ordinances in Keene. So actually that ordinance has been on the books since the 70s. Okay. So, and there was obviously a plan involved in that. But this is, again, goes to show that without being able to tell the full story of something, misinformation goes out, and there's not much that we can do to correct it.
And this is what I'm talking about, though. So, because maybe a better example would be the protest at the Manchester PD that got a couple of guys arrested.
The chalking?
The chalking stuff. That was a response to police brutality against a local case.
That's right.
That it wasn't concretely thought out. It was just, hey, let's go down here, let's wave some signs, let's write some chalk, and let's see what happens. And it ended up with Daniel getting arrested and Garrett getting arrested and a couple of guys.
How would you have approached it differently?
What I would have done is put out a press release before about a group of activists, about a group of concerned citizens coming, who are going to be voicing their displeasure over it. I would have tried to, I would have done that after I already had an established group of folks that I knew were committed to coming. Mm-hmm. And I would have tried to come on, and you talked about theatrical things, I would have tried to have come up with some type of theatrical plan in, revolving around police brutality. That way, the media knows about it. They show up and see your little theatrical action. You're on the local media at the end of the night and not in jail.
I think those are both really good ideas, and if you bring if the media were to actually come out, what would have been different? Because would the police have behaved in that same way
in front
of those cameras?
Like we did send a press release out before we went to Manchester. And to say like we might show up and see what happens, I mean, just like if you have 100 interactions with police employees and and let's say one of those you get arrested, you're never going to know which one it is, because if you're a peaceful person, it's just like so arbitrary. Like it may just be a guy. So what I'm saying is, I've been to lots of protests and rallies and whatever, and there's never ends in 9 people getting kidnapped and caged, and 9 of our devices being taken, and my phone being stolen by these people with badges. But media did show up. They were down the street. We waved them down, and they showed up initially. And I was interviewed on the station there, and I didn't hear it myself, but some of my friends that I do trust said that they heard the police employees who were on the corner watching the interview say, "Let's wait to make the arrest until she leaves." She being the interviewer, so they knew that the negative, eyes that would be, they wanted to make sure the less eyes there, the better, and then they just went around and around.
Department to then spin it after those eyes are closed and reopened.
Right.
Later
So
in a court case.
I mean, it's unfortunate all that happened. It was definitely a hassle, and from that came, we were there to try to point out these wrongs that had happened to this individual by their colleagues, and then a lot more folks get their rights transgressed. And then Damon and I spent a couple months in town doing outreach about it, and then we meet those high school students, one of whom captured Darren Murphy beating up, slamming a kid's head off the cafeteria table, and then Damon got wiretapping charges, and now he's got 5 years of good behavior hanging over his head. So these are things that we hope don't happen, but it's impossible to predict them because of the arbitrary nature of the state actors, and they definitely clamped on hardest on people who question their claimed authority. So whether it's that or whether it's something else, it's bound to happen until it doesn't. And so as long as we keep speaking out and we're not afraid, then that's the surest way to mitigate those risks.
Well, gentlemen, it's like 4 minutes to the next panel.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to be scheduled upstairs. So.
Could I do something, say something real quick? To kind of bolster Ian's case about how important media output is really important to extending liberty. There's one specific think tank that I have in mind, Center for a Stateless Society, that puts out op-ed pieces. They've had 15 academic research papers on a pretty high level. They're at c4ss.org, 4 is the number 4. And they do a lot of great audio and visual material too. So they have a YouTube channel which I help manage and put up videos usually on a weekly basis. So I think that really bolsters the case about how important it is. C4SS has been published worldwide, different countries, different languages, and gotten many mainstream newspapers like Counterpunch
Okay, thank you for the recommendation. I wanted to add something as well, and then we'll wrap this up. But I agree with Pete. In the case of what you call reactive activism, that's been a big critique over the years, and I think to some extent, planning is good if you have the time for it. But you can also get bogged down with planning as well. So you don't want to spend all your time planning when you could be doing. And some people have accused me of doing this, reactive activism or whatever, and I don't regret the things that I've done. I mean, again, some things have been more effective than others, but ultimately, I think we've gotten as much value out of everything that has been done as we possibly could. Maybe planning it better would have resulted in better results, or maybe we would have just planned ourselves into not doing it at all. And then I have concerns about the levels of planning that some people want to do. Like for instance, in Manchester years ago, there was a plan to do a radio station, or not radio, excuse me, a newspaper. And they planned this newspaper, and they brought a lawyer in to consult with them on how to go about legally creating the newspaper, and they had meetings about planning the newspaper and beginning to plan the newspaper, and it never happened. Yeah. So at some point you just got to do it, and do it, break cameras out, and hopefully it'll go well. And I agree with Pete, these guys are arbitrary. I mean, having been out in front of the police a bunch of times myself, you never know who you're dealing with and what their attitude's going to be in that moment. And in those moments, you can't plan for anything. You've got to react. Yeah. And there's only so many things that you can choose from in those circumstances. So it's difficult.
And again, I'm not trashing what you guys have done. It's been fantastic.
No, I think it's valid to say it could have been done better. And that's something that I know Pete's really good at, is when we're coming back from something, Pete will say something like, well, all right, guys, what can we do better next time? And then we talk about those things.
It's just because the reason why I bring it up is the media is lazy. I mean, it's extremely lazy. And Peter, I didn't know you put out a press release before.
Yeah, I think it's important.
All right, the time's now 3:30.
And so putting out that press release, putting out this stuff.
Didn't know you were waiting.
Yeah, our talk starts at 3:30.
Oh, great.
I went to
Thanks for your time, guys.
I went to an event.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
I went to an event that
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.